The throne room of Volanthus had never held such deafening silence. Seralith pressed her spine against the cold marble pillar, hidden behind a tapestry that depicted ancient wolves running beneath twin moons. Her fingers trembled against the embroidered threads as she watched the man she loved stand rigid on the dais below. 300 nobles filled the glittering hall, 300 witnesses to the moment her world would end. She should not have come. Every instinct had screamed at her to stay in the chamber where Caven had hidden her for 4 months, to wait for the message he had promised to send once the council's demands were satisfied. But no message had come. Only silence. Only absence. Only the growing terror that something had gone horribly wrong. Now she understood why. The Alpha King of Volanthus stood before his people in ceremonial black, silver threads catching the torchlight like captured stars. His shoulders were carved from granite, his jaw could have cut glass, and his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had gazed at her with such fierce tenderness just 6 days ago, stared ahead with the emptiness of a corpse. Seralith's hand moved instinctively to her lower belly, where his child grew in secret. "When the Morvanes have been appeased," he had whispered against her hair, his breath warm on her neck. "When the treaty is signed and the council has no more leverage, I will announce you as my queen, my fated mate. Nothing in this world or any other will change that." She had believed him. Gods above, she had believed every word. Her mind betrayed her then, pulling her back to the night everything had begun. The harvest masquerade, 4 months past, when she had been nothing but a traveling herbalist seeking work in the capital. She had wandered into the festival without understanding the traditions of Volanthus, without knowing that wolves walked freely in their shifted forms on that sacred night. She had seen him across the crowded square, a massive wolf with fur the color of midnight storms, silver threading through his coat like lightning frozen in flesh. The largest wolf she had ever encountered, but his movements were so fluid, so deliberately graceful, that she had assumed it must be a man in an elaborate costume. The finest costume she had ever seen. Wine had made her bold. Curiosity had made her foolish. "Nice costume," she had laughed, reaching out to stroke the impossibly soft fur. And her fingers had trailed down his back, marveling at the craftsmanship. And then, God's help her, she had tugged his tail. The wolf had spun with supernatural speed. Storm-gray eyes had locked onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Something ancient and primal had flickered in those depths, something that recognized her on a level beyond conscious thought. Before she could scream, before she could run, his teeth had sunk into the curve of her hip. The pain had lasted only a heartbeat. What followed was something else entirely, a rushing warmth that flooded her veins, a golden thread that wrapped around her soul and pulled taut, connecting her to the creature before her. Then the wolf had shifted, and Seralith had found herself staring up at the most powerful man in 3 kingdoms, his mouth still wet with her blood, his eyes blazing with shock and wonder and something that looked terrifyingly like reverence. "Mate," he had breathed. "My fated mate." She had not believed in fate before that night. Now, watching him prepare to choose another woman, she wished she still didn't. "The candidates will approach," the high priestess announced, her ancient voice cutting through the silence like a blade. 5 women in gowns of moonlight silk ascended the dais steps, daughters of the great houses, each one groomed from birth for this possibility, each one beautiful, each one powerful, and leading them, with hair like spun platinum and eyes the color of frozen amber, walked Valora of House Morvain. The crowd murmured approval. The Morvains controlled the eastern territories, commanded 3,000 warriors, and had been circling the throne for generations. This union would cement their loyalty forever. Seralith watched Caven's face for any sign of the man who had held her through countless nights, any flicker of warmth, any trace of recognition. His expression betrayed nothing. Something was wrong. The realization crashed through her like winter waves. The way he stood was mechanical, puppet-like. His movements lacked the fluid predatory grace she knew so intimately. And his scent. Even from this distance, the bond between them should have carried his essence to her. She smelled nothing but cold ash. Kaven, Alpha King of Volanthus, blood of the first pack. The High Priestess intoned. You have heard the Council's wisdom. You have reviewed the alliances. Your people await your choice. The silence stretched like a blade pressed against flesh. Sarilith stopped breathing. At her mark, the claiming bite on her hip erupted with sudden, searing heat. She gasped, her hand flying to the spot beneath her gown. Feel me, she begged through the bond. Turn around, find me. Tell them the choice was already made in moonlit gardens and tangled sheets and whispered promises. Kaven stepped forward. I choose. His voice rang out, hollow as an empty grave, Valora of House Morvain. The hall exploded with cheers, and something inside Sarilith shattered beyond repair. The mark on her hip blazed with agony so intense that her knees buckled. She caught herself against the pillar, biting through her lip to keep from screaming. Through tear-blurred vision, she watched Kaven take Valora's hand, watched him raise it to his lips, watched the woman smile with triumph while the man Sarilith loved showed nothing at all. He did not search the crowd for her. He did not hesitate. He did not seem to remember she existed. The child in her womb stirred, as if sensing its mother's anguish. Sarilith ran. She fled through servants' corridors she had memorized during her months of hiding. Her hand pressed against her mark, which burned like a brand pressed fresh to skin. Her other arm wrapped around her belly, protecting the secret that grew within. His child. His heir. Growing inside her while he chose another. She reached her hidden chamber and grabbed only what she could carry, a few coins, her grandmother's ring, the dried herbs that settled her stomach each morning. At the window, she paused. Below, celebration bonfires roared to life across the capital. Somewhere in that throne room, Kaven was accepting congratulations. Valora was planning their wedding. And no one knew that the Alpha King's true mate was disappearing into the darkness with his child in her womb. Goodbye, my love, Sarilith whispered, her voice cracking. May you find happiness with the woman you chose over me. She climbed through the window and vanished into the winter night. She did not see the figure that burst onto the dais moments later, shoving Valora aside with savage force. She did not see the storm-gray eyes that flickered with sudden, horrified awareness. She did not hear the roar that shook the ancient stones, not a sound of triumph, but of a man waking from a nightmare to find he had destroyed everything he loved. By the time Kaven reached her empty chamber, Sarilith was already gone, and the only trace of her was a single dried flower on the pillow, the same flower he had tucked behind her ear the night he swore she was his forever. 3 months later, the village of Willowfen had nearly forgotten it had a newcomer. Sarilith had arrived in the dead of winter, a young widow fleeing grief, or so she claimed. The village elders had taken pity on her haunted eyes and swelling belly, offering her an abandoned cottage at the forest's edge in exchange for her skills with herbs and remedies. She had accepted without hesitation. Now spring fought to emerge from the last stubborn frosts, and Sarilith had become simply Lark, the quiet healer who lived where the willows wept into the marsh. She birthed babies. She cured fevers. She mixed tinctures for aching joints and poultices for infected wounds. And every night, she lay awake with both hands pressed to her growing belly, feeling movements that came from 2 different places at once. Twins. The village midwife had confirmed it a fortnight past, her weathered face bright with excitement. 2 blessings, she had called them. 2 miracles. Sarilith had smiled and said nothing. She knew what it truly meant. Twin births among wolfkind were rare and powerful. The children of a true fated bond, carrying magic from both bloodlines. If anyone discovered what grew inside her, she pushed the thought away. No one would discover anything. She was Lark now. A nobody. A widow. A woman with no connection to the Alpha King who had publicly rejected her before the entire kingdom. The mark on her hip throbbed. It had never stopped burning. Sarilith had examined it countless times, watching in confusion as the scar tissue darkened rather than faded. Among wolf kind, a rejected mate bond was supposed to dissolve completely within weeks. The mark should have vanished, leaving only smooth skin and bitter memories. Instead, it pulsed with heat that kept her from sleep. It ached when storms rolled in from the east, from the direction of Volanthus. And sometimes, in the depths of night, she could swear she felt something through it. A presence, a searching, a desperate, clawing hunger that raked against the edges of her consciousness. Impossible. Caven had chosen another. The bond should have severed the moment he spoke those words. Unless the bond had never been one-sided at all, unless something had been terribly, horrifically wrong that night. Sarilith shoved the thought down. False hope was a poison more deadly than any she knew how to brew. A knock at her door made her flinch. "Mistress Lark?" A young voice, breathless with excitement. Petra, the baker's daughter. "Mistress Lark, you must come quickly." Sarilith opened the door to find the girl practically vibrating. "What is it, child?" "Traders from the capital. They bring news." Petra's eyes were wide as moons. Terrible news about the Alpha King. The world tilted beneath Sarilith's feet. She gripped the doorframe. "What news?" "They say he has gone mad," Petra whispered. "Completely, utterly mad. He tears the kingdom apart searching for someone. A woman no one can name. He has not slept in months. The nobles whisper that his wolf has nearly consumed him." Sarilith's throat constricted. "And his chosen bride?" "Lady Valora?" Petra shook her head vigorously. "That is the strangest part. They say he has not touched her, has not spoken to her. He threw her from his chambers the very night of the choosing, and has refused to see her since." The girl leaned closer. "The traders say he weeps in the night, that he howls for hours without stopping, that he has offered 50,000 gold pieces to anyone who can find this mystery woman. 50,000 gold. A fortune that could buy a small kingdom." Sarilith forced her expression to remain neutral. "The affairs of kings are not our concern. Thank your father for sharing the news." But after Petra scampered away, Sarilith collapsed into her chair. He was searching for her. Why would Caven tear his kingdom apart for a woman he had publicly rejected? Why would he refuse to touch his chosen bride? Why would he weep and howl like a wolf who had lost its mate? Unless he had never chosen Valora at all. Unless something had been done to him. The thought was too enormous to hold. Too terrifying. Too wrapped in the dangerous thorns of hope. Movement at the tree line caught her eye. Sarilith's blood turned to ice. A shape stood between the ancient willows. Large, four-legged, fur the color of rust and shadow, eyes that gleamed with intelligence no natural beast possessed. A wolf? As she watched, frozen with terror, another emerged beside it. Then another, then two more. 5 wolves, their amber gazes fixed on her cottage with predatory focus. They had found her. Sarilith's mark exploded with fire. She gasped, doubling over as pain radiated through her entire body. This was nothing like the dull burn she had grown accustomed to. And this was searing, overwhelming, as if someone had pressed molten iron directly to her flesh. And beneath the pain, she felt something else. A presence. Massive. Desperate. Pushing against her consciousness with the force of a battering ram. Sarilith. Her name, echoing through the bond she had thought was broken. "I found you. I finally found you." The twins kicked violently, movements coming from opposite sides at once. And through the window, Sarilith watched the largest of the wolves throw back its head and howl. a sound of triumph and anguish and desperate, devastating relief. He was here, not just his wolves. Him. The front door shuddered beneath a heavy knock. Saralith grabbed the iron poker from beside her hearth. The knock came again. Harder. Please. A male voice, rough with exhaustion. I know you are there. I can feel you through the door. Please, Saralith. I need to explain. Not Caven's voice. Someone else. She approached the door with the poker raised. Who are you? My name is Tavros, first beta to the AlphaKing. A pause. I have been searching for you for 3 months. His Majesty does not know I found you first. I came ahead because there are things you must understand before he reaches you. Saralith's heart pounded against her ribs. Why should I trust anything from Volanthus? Because the king did not choose Valora. The words came fast, urgent. He was ensorcelled, bound by blood magic so dark it has not been used in 5 centuries. He spoke those words against his will, trapped inside his own body while something else controlled his tongue. And when the spell broke 3 days later, he woke screaming your name. The poker trembled in her grip. If you do not believe me, Tavros continued, then believe the bond. It never severed. It never could. True fated mates cannot be separated by any force short of death itself. Whatever you have felt these past months, the burning mark, the presence pushing against your mind, the dreams that feel more real than waking, that was him. Reaching for you. Every single night. Saralith's eyes stung. The dreams. Gods, the dreams. Caven's voice calling her name through endless darkness, his hands reaching for her across impossible distances, his wolf howling with grief that shook the foundations of her sleep. She had told herself they were phantoms, wishful thinking from a shattered heart. Open the door, she heard herself say. Slowly. The door swung inward to reveal a man in his middle years, silver threading through dark hair, his face carved with the exhaustion of someone who had not truly rested in months. Behind him stood 2 younger wolves in human form, their postures alert but not aggressive. Tavros's amber eyes dropped to her belly, and something like grief flickered across his features. You carry his children, he said quietly. The council suspected. After you vanished. It was the only explanation for why he went so completely mad. He does not know. He knows something grows within you. He can feel their presence through the bond, faint but unmistakable. He does not know there are 2. Tavros stepped inside, his gaze sweeping her modest cottage. My lady, there is little time. The king is minutes behind me, and once he reaches you, nothing will be able to pull him away. But you must understand the danger you face. Danger? Saralith laughed bitterly. I have been in danger since the moment I tugged that tail. Not like this. Tavros withdrew a folded letter from his coat. The seal was broken, but she recognized the serpent crest pressed into black wax. House Morvain. We intercepted this a fortnight ago, Tavros said. Read it. Saralith took the letter with numb fingers. The false mate has been located. The healer woman in Willowfen matches all descriptions. Eliminate her before the king arrives. The children must not be born. Long live Queen Valora. The cottage seemed to spin around her. Assassins, she breathed, already on their way, perhaps already here. Tavros's hand moved to the blade at his hip. Lord Calum Morvain has invested too much in this scheme to let you destroy it. His daughter was supposed to bear the royal heirs. His bloodline was supposed to sit on the throne for generations. You and those children are the only obstacles remaining. But if Cavan was ensorcelled, the Morvains will never let that truth emerge. With you dead and the children with you, they can claim the bond was false, that you bewitched the king with your herbcraft, that Vailora was always his true mate. Tavros's voice hardened. They have already begun spreading such rumors. Half the nobility believes you are a witch who ensnared their king with dark magic." Before Sarilith could respond, a howl split the air outside, not a howl of greeting, a howl of warning. Tavros spun toward the window. His face went pale. "No. It is too soon." Sarilith followed his gaze. Through the glass, she could see shapes emerging from the forest on the opposite side of her cottage. Not the rust and shadow wolves who had watched her earlier. These wolves were different. Darker. Moving with coordinated precision that spoke of training and purpose. And behind them, stepping from the shadows with a crossbow already raised, walked a figure in black leather whose face was hidden behind a mask of bone. "The more vain assassins," Tavros snarled. "They are already here." He shifted in an explosion of fur and fury, his wolf form crashing through the window to meet the attackers head-on. His two companions followed, their howls mixing with screams and the terrible sounds of combat. Sarilith backed toward the rear of the cottage, her poker clutched in white-knuckled hands. Through the shattered window she watched Tavros tear through a dark wolf with savage efficiency. But more kept coming. 5, 7, 10. Too many. An arrow punched through the wall beside her head. She dove to the floor, her arms wrapping protectively around her belly. The twins thrashed inside her, their movements frantic, almost violent. "I know," she thought at them desperately. "I know. I am scared too." Another arrow shattered the glass above her, then another. The cottage was being turned into a pincushion. Through the chaos, she heard Tavros yelp in pain, heard one of his companions go silent. They were losing. Sarilith's mark blazed with sudden, overwhelming heat, and with it came a surge of something else. Not pain, power. Raw and ancient and utterly unfamiliar. It was not coming from her. It was coming from the children. Golden light began to emanate from her belly, seeping through her dress like dawn breaking through storm clouds. The twins' movements synchronized, no longer frantic but focused, as if they were channeling something through her body. The next arrow that flew toward her dissolved into ash before it reached her skin. Sarilith stared at her glowing hands in shock. She had always possessed a modest gift for herbs and healing. Small magic, unremarkable magic. This was something else entirely. The cottage door exploded inward. The masked figure stood in the doorway, crossbow aimed directly at Sarilith's heart. Through the eye holes of the bone mask, she could see cold amber eyes filled with hatred. "The king's whore," a female voice hissed. "Do you know how long I have waited for this moment?" Sarilith recognized that voice. Valora. "You should have stayed hidden," the would-be queen continued, advancing with the crossbow steady. "You should have let him believe you had abandoned him. Instead, you let the bond guide him here. You let him hope." Her finger tightened on the trigger. "I am going to enjoy telling him I killed you slowly." The golden light around Sarilith flared brighter. But she was not a warrior. She did not know how to wield whatever power the twins were channeling through her. And Valora's crossbow was already singing its deadly song. The bolt flew toward her heart. And the world exploded in shadow and fury. Something massive crashed through the remaining wall of the cottage, not through the door, not through the window, but directly through the wooden beams as if they were made of paper. A wolf the size of a warhorse, fur black as a moonless sky, eyes blazing with silver fire that left after-images in the air. The bolt meant for Sarilith's heart caught in his jaws. He crushed it to splinters. And then those terrible, beautiful, beloved eyes turned to Valora with a hatred so pure it seemed to distort the air around him. The would-be queen had time for one scream before the Alpha King's jaws closed around her arm and hurled her through the ruined wall into the darkness beyond. Silence fell. The massive wolf turned. Sarilith could not move, could not breathe, could only stare at the creature who radiated power like heat from a forge fire. He approached her slowly, each step deliberate. Blood dripped from his muzzle. His silver eyes burned with emotions she could not begin to untangle. And then, with infinite gentleness, the most powerful wolf in 3 kingdoms lowered his great head and pressed his nose to her belly. The twins went still. For one perfect crystalline moment, father and children recognized each other through flesh and magic and bond. The wolf made a sound that was almost a sob. Then light consumed him, and where a monster had stood, a man now knelt. Caven looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. "You are alive," he whispered, his voice shattered and raw. "You are alive, and you are mine." Sarilith stared down at the man kneeling before her. 3 months of grief. 3 months of believing herself betrayed. 3 months of building walls around her shattered heart so she could survive each day without him. And now he knelt in the ruins of her cottage, tears carving rivers through the blood on his face, his hand hovering over her belly as if she were something sacred. The bond between them roared with his emotions, anguish, relief, desperate love, and beneath it all, a guilt so crushing it threatened to pull her under. "Do not," Sarilith heard herself say, stepping backward. "Do not kneel before me as if you did not destroy me." Caven flinched as if she had struck him. "Sarilith, I watched you." The words tore from her throat, jagged and bleeding. "I stood in that throne room with your child growing inside me, and I watched you choose her. I watched you take her hand. I watched you look at her like she was your future, while I hid in the shadows like something shameful. I did not choose her." Caven rose to his feet, his voice cracking. "I would never—" "Your mouth spoke the words." Sarilith's control shattered. "Your lips touched her hand. Do you know what it felt like? To carry your mark, your child, your promises, and watch you throw them all away?" "Yes." The word was barely a whisper. "I know exactly what it felt like, because I was there, Sarilith. Trapped inside my own body while something else wore my skin." She froze. Caven's hands trembled as he raised them, showing her his palms as if in surrender. The Morvanes used blood magic, old magic, forbidden magic. Calum Morvaine cut his own daughter's palm and mixed her blood with mine during a toast I thought was ceremonial. His voice broke. I felt the curse take hold like ice spreading through my veins. I screamed inside my own mind as my body walked to that dais. I begged, I pleaded, I fought with everything I had, and none of it mattered. Sarilith's chest constricted. "You were aware?" "Every moment." Tears spilled down his cheeks. "I saw you in the shadows. I felt your presence through the bond. I tried to call out to you, tried to turn my head, tried to do anything to show you that the man speaking those words was not me." A sob escaped him. "And I could not. I could only watch as my own voice destroyed the woman I love. The woman I love." The words hit her like a physical blow. "When the curse broke," Caven continued, his voice raw, "I did not know 3 days had passed. I woke in Valora's chambers with her hands on my body, and He shuddered. "I threw her across the room. I ran to find you. I tore apart your chamber searching for any trace, any clue, any sign of where you had gone." "The flower," Sarilith whispered. "On the pillow. I have carried it against my heart every day since." Caven reached into his shirt and withdrew a small leather pouch. Inside, pressed and preserved, was the dried bloom she had left behind. "Every day, every hour, every moment I spent searching." Sarilith's walls crumbled. The tears she had held back for 3 months finally broke free, streaming down her face as the enormity of what had been done to them both crashed through her defenses. "I believed you had abandoned me," she choked out. "I believed everything you said was a lie, That I was just a foolish girl who mistook a king's amusement for love. Caven closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands cupped her face with devastating gentleness, tilting her head until she had no choice but to meet his gaze. "You are not foolish," he said fiercely. "You are my mate. My fated mate. The bond recognized you before I even knew your name. Do you think I would surrender that for politics? For power? For anything?" His thumb brushed away her tears. "I have not touched Valora," he continued. "I have not spoken to her except to pronounce her sentence. I have not slept more than an hour at a time because every time I close my eyes, I see your face in that crowd. I see you running. I see you believing I betrayed you, and I cannot." His voice shattered completely. "I cannot bear it, Sarilith. These 3 months have been the closest thing to death I have ever known." She broke. Sarilith threw her arms around him, burying her face against his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her cheek. His arms wrapped around her instantly, crushing her against him as if he feared she might dissolve into mist. "I felt you," she gasped between sobs. "Through the bond, every night. You called my name in my dreams. I reached for you constantly." His lips pressed against her hair. "My wolf refused to accept you were gone. He drove me half mad, howling for you, searching for you, refusing to let me rest until I found you. The mark never faded, because the bond never broke." Caven pulled back to look at her, his storm-gray eyes blazing with intensity. "It cannot break, Sarilith. We are fated, written into the fabric of existence itself. No curse, no magic, no force in any realm can truly sever what we are." His hand moved to her belly, spreading across the curve where his children grew. "Two," he breathed, wonder flooding his features as he felt movement from opposite sides. "There are 2 of them. Twins." Sarilith placed her hand over his. "They saved me tonight. Whatever power they carry, it manifested when the assassins attacked." Caven's expression shifted to something fierce and protective. "They are magnificent, like their mother. They have their father's stubbornness." A watery laugh escaped her. "They refused to let me sleep through the night even before tonight." Caven laughed too, a broken sound of pure relief. Then his forehead pressed against hers, and the laughter faded into something deeper. "I love you," he said quietly. "I loved you from the moment you tugged my tail and demanded to know where I purchased my costume. I loved you through every night I held you in secret. I loved you through 3 months of agony. And I will love you until the stars burn out and the moons fall from the sky." Sarilith's heart swelled until she thought it might burst. "I love you too," she whispered. "Even when I believed you had betrayed me. Even when I hated you. I never stopped loving you." Caven kissed her. The moment their lips met, the bond between them ignited. It was not gentle. It was a wildfire consuming dry timber, a flood breaking through a dam, a lightning strike that illuminated every dark corner of their souls. Sarilith gasped against his mouth as his emotions crashed into her. Love so vast it dwarfed oceans, desire held on a razor's edge, and a fierce protective fury that wrapped around her like armor. She felt him feel her in return, the grief she had carried, the loneliness, the desperate, stubborn love she had never managed to extinguish. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, Caven's eyes blazed silver. "Soon," he promised, his voice rough with restrained need, "when you are safe, when our enemies are ash, I will complete the bond properly, and no force in existence will ever separate us again." A commotion outside shattered the moment. Tavros limped through the ruined doorway, his human form bloodied and battered. Behind him, the 2 wolves who had accompanied him carried a struggling figure between them. Valora, her bone mask gone, her face twisted with fury and fear. "My king," Tavros said grimly, "we have secured the immediate threat." but we intercepted a messenger before he could flee. He held up a small scroll. You need to see this. Caven took the scroll, his arm still wrapped around Serelith's waist. As he read, his expression darkened into something terrifying. What is it? Serelith asked. Her father. Caven's voice was ice. Lord Calum has made his move. While I searched for you, he positioned his forces throughout the capital. 2 hours ago, he seized the palace. Serelith's blood chilled. Seized it? The Morvain banner flies over Volanthis. Tavros's face was grim. Lord Calum has declared himself regent, claiming the king has gone mad. He holds the palace staff hostage, anyone who refused to swear loyalty to House Morvain. How many? Caven demanded. 43 souls. Including. Tavros hesitated. Including who? Brenneth. Your mother's former handmaiden, the one who helped hide Lady Serelith during her months at the palace. Tavros's voice softened. She refused to reveal where your mate had gone, even under torture. Lord Calum has sentenced her to public execution at dawn as an example. Serelith's hand flew to her mouth. Brenneth, the elderly woman who had brought her extra blankets when the mountain chill crept through the windows. Who had smuggled her pastries from the kitchens, who had smiled knowingly, but never breathed a word of the king's secret visits. No, Serelith breathed, we cannot let her die. Caven's grip on her tightened. We will not. Calum Morvain will learn what happens to those who threaten my mate, and those who protect her. He looked down at Valora, still struggling in his wolf's grip. Your father believes he has won, he told her coldly. He will discover his error shortly. Valora spat at his feet. You will never take back that palace. My father has 3,000 warriors. You have a handful of wolves and a pregnant whore. Caven smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. I have every wolf in Volanthis, he said softly. Every wolf who has felt the true bond between their king and queen. Every wolf who knows what the Morvains have done. He leaned close. They have been waiting for me to find her. Now that I have, nothing will stop us. As if summoned by his words, howls began to rise from the darkness beyond the village. 1 at first, then 5, then dozens, then hundreds. An army of voices lifted in fury and loyalty and bloodlust. The Alpha King's wolves had arrived, and they were hungry for justice. They reached Volanthis as the eastern sky began to lighten. Serelith rode before Caven on his massive black warhorse, his arm locked around her waist, his body shielding her from the bitter wind. And she had tried to argue that she should stay behind, that her presence would distract him, that a pregnant woman had no place riding into battle. He had silenced her with a look that brooked no argument. I lost you once, he had said, lifting her onto his saddle. I will not lose you again, not for an hour, not for a minute. Where I go, you go. So she had stopped protesting. Now, as the capital rose before them, she understood the true scale of what they faced. The Morvain banner, a silver serpent on a black field, flew from every tower. Soldiers in dark armor patrolled the walls, and above the main gate, suspended in an iron cage, hung a body. Who is that? Serelith whispered. Tavros rode up beside them, his expression grim. Lord Aldrich, the master of coin. Kishi, he refused to open the treasury for Lord Calum. Caven's arm tightened around her. Through the bond, she felt his fury building like a storm about to break. How many inside support him? He asked. Unknown. Perhaps a quarter of the guard were Morvain loyalists already. The rest were given a choice. Swear fealty or join the hostages. Tavros's jaw clenched. Most chose survival. I cannot blame them. A scout emerged from the shadows, dropping to one knee before the king. Report, Caven commanded. Lord Calum has barricaded himself in the great hall with the hostages, Your Majesty. He has archers positioned at every window. The moment our forces breach the walls, he has sworn to execute 5 prisoners for every minute we advance. Serelith's stomach turned. That is 43 innocent people, she said. 43 people who stayed loyal when it would have been easier to bend. I know. Kavan's voice was tight. I know what is at stake. She could feel his mind racing through the bond, calculating options, discarding them, searching for any path that did not end in massacre. There is another way, she heard herself say. Kavan stiffened. No. You do not even know what I am going to suggest. I know you. His arm became a vice around her waist. I know that selfless, reckless heart of yours. The answer is no. Sarilith twisted to face him. Calum wants me dead. I am the obstacle to his daughter's ascension. If I offer myself in exchange for the hostages, absolutely not. He will take the trade, Kavan. His entire plan hinges on eliminating me. 43 lives for one. Your life is not one. His voice cracked. Your life is mine. Your life is theirs. His hand pressed against her belly. I will not sacrifice my mate and my children on the altar of a madman's ambition. Then what? We storm the walls and watch him slaughter innocents? We wait and let Brenneth hang at dawn while I hide in safety? Sarilith gripped his face between her hands. I cannot live with that, Kavan. I cannot build a life with you on a foundation of 43 graves. Pain lanced through the bond, his anguish, raw and terrible. You ask me to let you walk into the hands of a man who has already tried to kill you, he said hoarsely. You ask me to watch you disappear again. I ask you to trust me. Sarilith pressed her forehead to his. The children's power manifested once tonight. If Calum threatens me, truly threatens me, it may manifest again. And this time, you will be close enough to reach me. And if it does not, then you will be close enough anyway. She kissed him softly. I am not asking to die. I am asking to fight, to give those people a chance, to show Calum that the woman he calls a pregnant whore is braver than his entire army. Kavan was silent for a long moment. Through the bond, she felt his wolf pacing, snarling, and desperate to refuse. But she also felt the king beneath the wolf, the leader who understood sacrifice, who knew that sometimes victory required gambling everything. If he touches you, Kavan finally said, his voice barely above a whisper, I will tear out his spine and mount it above my throne. I would expect nothing less. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, pouring 3 months of grief and a lifetime of love into the press of his lips. And when they parted, his eyes burned silver. Tavros, he commanded, send a messenger to the gate. Tell Lord Calum that the king requests a parley. Tell him I am prepared to discuss terms. The beta's face twisted with reluctance, but he bowed. Yes, your majesty. As he rode away, Sarilith looked up at the palace that had been her home for 4 brief, beautiful months. I will see you soon, she told Kavan, on the other side of this. You had better. His hand cupped her face. Because I meant what I said about completing the bond, and I intend to do it before our children arrive. Despite everything, Sarilith smiled. 20 minutes later, she walked through the palace gates alone. The great hall of Volanthus had been transformed into a prison. 43 people knelt in chains along the walls, their faces hollow with fear. Guards in Morvain colors stood at every exit. Archers lined the gallery above, their bows trained on the hostages below. And on the throne that belonged to Kavan, Lord Calum Morvain lounged like a cat surveying captured mice. He was tall, silver-haired, and handsome in a cruel way that reminded Sarilith of a blade kept polished but never sheathed. His amber eyes tracked her approach with undisguised triumph. The king's whore, he said, his voice echoing through the hall. Come to beg for scraps. Come to offer a trade. Sarilith stopped at the base of the dais, her hands resting on her belly. Me for them. The woman you want dead, delivered to your hands, in exchange for 43 lives. Calum's smile widened. And why would I trade 43 pieces for one? Because I am the only piece that matters. Serelith held his gaze without flinching. Your entire scheme hinges on eliminating me. The curse on Caven has been exposed. The choosing is void. Your daughter's claim to the throne is worthless as long as I live and carry the true heirs. She gestured to the hostages. These people are leverage, nothing more. They cannot give you legitimacy. They cannot give you the bloodline you crave. She spread her arms. I can. Or rather, my death can. Take me, release them, and you get everything you actually want. Lord Calum studied her for a long moment. Then he laughed. I see why he favors you, he said. Brave, clever, willing to martyr yourself for strangers. He rose from the throne and descended the steps with predatory grace. But you have made one critical miscalculation, girl. He stopped before her, close enough that she could smell the wine on his breath. I do not need to trade, he whispered. I have you and the hostages. I have the palace. I have 3,000 warriors. His hand shot out, gripping her jaw. What I do not have is any reason to show mercy. He shoved her backward. Serelith stumbled, barely catching herself before she fell. Guards seized her arms instantly, wrenching them behind her back. Kill 5 hostages, Lord Calum commanded. Start with the old woman who protected her. No! Serelith screamed, struggling against her captors. Brenneth was dragged forward, her elderly face pale but defiant. The sword rose above her neck. And Serelith felt something inside her snap. Golden light exploded from her belly. The light was not hers alone. Serelith felt her children's power surge through her veins like liquid fire, but this time she also felt something else rising alongside it. Something that had slumbered in her blood since the night Caven's teeth had pierced her flesh. The wolf. Pain ripped through her body as bones began to shift. She screamed, but the sound that emerged was not entirely human. It was layered with harmonics, with the cry of something ancient and primal clawing its way to the surface. The guards holding her stumbled backward as golden-white fur erupted along her arms. Her spine arched, her jaw cracked and reformed. Impossible, Lord Calum breathed. She was not born wolf. She cannot. But she was. The transformation that should have taken months of gradual awakening, that should have required careful guidance from her mate, exploded through Serelith in the span of 3 heartbeats. Her children's magic accelerated the process, their combined power demanding that their mother become what she was always meant to be. When the light faded, a wolf stood where a woman had knelt. She was smaller than an alpha's mate might typically be, but her fur blazed like captured moonlight, and her eyes burned with amber fire that held ancient depths. Power radiated from her in waves that made even the more vain warriors step back in primal terror. The sword meant for Brenneth clattered to the floor. Serelith lunged, her jaws closed around the executioner's arm before he could react, and she flung him aside like a child's toy. She placed herself between Brenneth and the other guards, a snarl building in her chest that vibrated through the stone floor. Touch her, that snarl promised, and I will paint these walls with your blood. Lord Calum recovered faster than his men. Kill it, he screamed. Kill her now! Arrows sang from the gallery above. Serelith moved on instinct, dodging the first volley with supernatural speed. But she was untrained, unfamiliar with her new body, and there were too many shafts flying toward her. One caught her shoulder. She yelped, stumbling, and felt the burn of silver racing through her blood. Poison. They had been prepared for wolves. More arrows knocked, more bows drew. And then the great hall doors exploded inward. A wolf the size of Nightmare crashed through the ancient wood, his midnight fur seeming to absorb the torchlight, his silver eyes blazing with the fury of 1,000 storms. He did not slow, he did not hesitate. He simply moved, a blur of shadow and violence that tore through the more vain guards like parchment. Caven. He had not waited. The moment he felt her pain through the bond, he had come. Behind him poured a flood of wolves, gray and brown and black and rust, eyes gleaming, teeth bared. Tavros led them, his own wolf form savage with vengeance. They crashed into the Morvain forces with the sound of thunder. Sarilith turned her attention back to Lord Calum. The Lord had drawn a sword, the same silver-edged blade his men carried, designed to kill wolfkind. He held it before him as she approached, his earlier confidence cracking into something closer to terror. "Stay back," he commanded. "I am Lord of the Eastern Territories. I command." Sarilith shifted. The transformation flowed through her smoothly this time, when her wolf settling beneath her skin as her human form reasserted itself. She stood before him naked and unashamed, her shoulder bleeding sluggishly, her belly still rounded with his enemy's airs. "You commanded," she corrected quietly. "Now you command nothing." Calum's sword thrust toward her heart. Her hand caught the blade. The silver burned, but she held firm, blood streaming between her fingers as she met his eyes with deadly calm. "You tried to steal my mate. You tried to murder my children. You tried to destroy everyone who showed me kindness." She twisted the blade from his grip, ignoring the agony in her palm. "But I am not the frightened girl who fled into the night. I am the Alpha Queen of Volanthus, and you have made a terrible mistake." She reversed the sword and drove it through his shoulder, pinning him to the throne he had stolen. His scream echoed through the hall. Around them, the battle was ending. Morvain wolves fled or surrendered. The hostages were being freed, their chains struck away by Kaven's loyal guards. And through it all, Brenneth watched with tears streaming down her weathered face. A massive black wolf padded toward Sarilith, his muzzle dark with blood. She turned to face her mate. Kaven shifted, his human form emerging from the shadows of his wolf. He was wounded, scratches across his chest, a gash along his arm. But his eyes held nothing but fierce, desperate love. "You shifted," he breathed. "The children helped." She swayed suddenly, the poison in her veins and the blood loss from her wounds finally catching up. "Kaven, I think I need to—" He caught her before she fell. "Healer!" he roared. "Now." But Sarilith gripped his arm. "Wait. The bond." Tavros said, "If we complete it, the mate bond can neutralize poisons, can heal wounds that would otherwise—" She did not need to finish. Kaven understood. He lowered his mouth to her throat, to the spot where her pulse fluttered weakly beneath her skin. His teeth grazed the sensitive flesh. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice raw. "Here? Now? Like this?" "Complete me," she whispered. "Make me yours. Forever." His teeth sank into her neck. The pain lasted only a heartbeat. What followed was transcendence. The bond between them, already strong, exploded into something cosmic. Sarilith felt Kaven's essence pour into her as hers flowed into him. Every memory, every emotion, every secret corner of their souls laid bare. She saw herself through his eyes on the night of the masquerade. Not a foolish girl who tugged the wrong tail, but a vision in candlelight whose laugh had stopped his heart. She felt his shock when the bond had ignited between them, his desperate joy when he realized what she was to him. She felt his horror during the choosing, felt him screaming inside his frozen body, felt his wolf clawing at the walls of the curse, felt the moment the spell broke and he woke to find her gone. She felt 3 months of agony, sleepless nights, endless searching, the slow descent toward madness as his wolf howled for its missing mate. And beneath it all, she felt love. Love so vast it dwarfed mountains. Love so deep it touched the foundations of existence itself. When she could bear no more, she tilted her head and sank her own teeth into his throat. Kaven groaned against her skin as the bond sealed from both sides. And they were one. Finally, completely, eternally one. When they finally released each other, the great hall had gone silent. Every wolf present had felt the bond's completion, a shockwave of power that rippled through the pack bonds connecting every subject to their king. They knew, on a level beyond words, that their alpha had claimed his true queen, and that nothing would ever separate them again. Sarilith looked up at Kayvon, her wounds already beginning to close as the completed bond worked its healing magic. "Is it done?" she asked softly. He pressed his forehead to hers. "It is done," he confirmed. "You are mine, Sarilith. My mate, my queen, my heart." His hand spread across her belly, where the twins had finally settled into peaceful stillness. "And they are ours, our legacy, our future." She smiled, exhaustion and joy warring in her expression. "Then perhaps," she murmured, "your queen could request a bath and a bed? Conquering usurpers is surprisingly tiring." Caven laughed, a real laugh, full and warm and alive. "Anything," he promised. "Everything. Whatever you desire for the rest of our lives." He lifted her into his arms and carried her from the ruined hall, leaving Tavros to deal with the wounded and the captured and the mess of reclaiming a kingdom. Behind them, Lord Calum hung pinned to the throne, his blood pooling beneath him. His trial would come later. Tonight, the Alpha King had other priorities. In the weeks that followed, justice came to Volanthis. Lord Calum Morvain stood trial before the assembled packs, his crimes laid bare for all to witness. The blood magic, the stolen choosing, the attempted murder of the true queen and the royal heirs, the 43 innocents he had chained and threatened to slaughter. He offered no defense, there was none to give. The sentence was death. Sarilith did not attend the execution. She had seen enough of Calum Morvain to last several lifetimes. Instead, she sat in the palace gardens with Brenneth beside her, watching spring finally triumph over the last stubborn traces of winter. "You should not have risked yourself for me," the elderly woman said softly. "An old servant is not worth a queen's life." "You are not just a servant." Sarilith took her weathered hand. "You protected me when I was frightened and alone. You kept my secret when revealing it could have earned you favor. You endured torture rather than betray me." She squeezed gently. "You are family, Brenneth. And family protects each other." The old woman wept. Valora's fate was different. Exile to the frozen wastelands beyond the northern mountains, stripped of her name and her wolf, condemned to live out her days as the nothing she had once accused Sarilith of being. Some called it mercy. Others called it a punishment worse than death. Sarilith called it finished. The kingdom healed alongside its queen. The crops that had withered during Kayvon's desperate search began to grow again, responding to the stability of a completed mate bond. The wolves who had grown restless and aggressive settled back into peace, their instincts calmed by the harmony radiating from their alpha pair, and through it all, Sarilith's belly grew. The twins were active, their movements constant, Hem and their magic occasionally flickering beneath her skin in moments of strong emotion. The palace healers monitored her carefully, marveling at the strength of the children who had already saved their mother's life twice over. "They will be extraordinary," the head healer proclaimed. "I have never felt such power in unborn wolves." Kayvon, who had refused to leave Sarilith's side for more than minutes at a time, simply smiled and pressed his hand to her stomach. "They are their mother's children," he said. "Of course they will be extraordinary." The birth came on a night when both moons hung full and heavy in the sky. Sarilith labored for hours, Kayvon beside her throughout, his hand clutching hers as she brought their children into the world. The boy came first, announcing his arrival with a cry that echoed through the chamber. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's amber eyes, and when the healer placed him in Sarilith's arms, she felt a spark of healing magic pulse from his tiny fingers. "A healer," she breathed. "He carries my gift." The girl followed minutes later, smaller but fiercer, her eyes already blazing with silver fire. When she shifted in her mother's arms, an impossibility for one so young, her fur gleamed white as moonlight. "And she carries mine," Caven whispered, awe transforming his features. "A born shifter. There has not been one in the royal line for 12 generations." He gathered all three of them into his arms, his mate and his heirs, holding them as if they were the most precious treasures in existence, because they were. "Thank you," he murmured against Sarilith's hair, "for fighting for us, for believing, even when I gave you every reason not to, for tugging that ridiculous tail." Sarilith laughed, exhausted and radiant and impossibly happy. "To be fair," she managed, "it was a very impressive tale." Caven's laughter joined hers, filling the chamber with warmth. Outside their window, the wolves of Volanthus lifted their voices in celebration. A howl for the new prince, a howl for the new princess, a howl for the Alpha King and his fated queen, whose bond had survived betrayal and exile and assassination and war. And in the great tapestry of the kingdom's history, a new chapter was woven in threads of gold and silver. The story of a wandering herbalist who tugged a wolf's tail and changed the fate of nations. The story of a king who tore apart his realm to find his stolen mate. The story of twins born of true love and ancient magic, are destined to reshape the world. They had found each other against impossible odds. They had fought through curses and conspiracies and their own broken hearts. And now, wrapped in each other's arms with their children nestled between them, they had everything they had ever wanted. Not power, not thrones, not kingdoms. Each other, forever. Sarilith would often tell the story in later years, how she had wandered into a festival she did not understand, seen a wolf she mistook for a costume, and made the most reckless decision of her life. "Nice costume," she would say, mimicking her younger self's wine-bold confidence. And Caven would pull her close, pressing a kiss to the claiming mark on her throat. "Best mistake you ever made," he would murmur. She would laugh and agree, because it was. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.